Doug Fischer, Ring TV, joins me on the Sports Buffet podcast. From time to time, we always appreciate Doug's willingness to come on. Great guest to us all the way from the beginning. He joined me and talked some boxing. We talked sweet science. We look ahead to Pacquiao and Bradley on Saturday. We review the Tarver card from Showtime this past week. And we talk about Antonio Margarito. News broke on Thursday, that he was retiring as well. Just joining a trifecta of fighters lately, Winky Wright and Shane Mosley, also hanging it up. Doug Fischer's never hanging it up, though. He's on the Sports Buffet podcast.
Always love talking to Doug Fischer, Ring TV. You can find out all the good stuff with Doug and his colleagues, and Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Satterfield. They all got it broken down for you. And Doug, before we preview, let's review a little quick. I'm glad I didn't have to pay for that Showtime fight like a pay-per-view last week, other than just normal subscription fees.
Yeah, that was a very long broadcast. Not a lot of drama, not a lot of action. Although I did enjoy the middleweight fight. I enjoyed the Peter Quillen, Winky Wright fight. The fight was good on a couple fronts. When Winky Wright is pressed with an aggressive young fighter, somebody who's a good athlete like Kid Chocolate, he usually makes for good fights. And the fight had its moments. Winky Wright was dropped. I don't think I'd ever seen him drop before in his career. And he was rocked a few times late in the bout. And the fight convinced him to retire. And that's a good thing. We need new blood in boxing. I mean, Winky's just kind of been hanging around. I think he had one fight in the previous 5 years going into this fight. So it was like he was already semi-retired, but he had never really officially announced it. And this 10-round unanimous loss to Peter Quillen convinced Ronald Wright to hang up his gloves finally. And that's good. And with his exit from the game, we kind of have a new player in the middleweight division, Peter Quillen. He's undefeated. He's not perfect, He's a big, strong middleweight. There's some technical deficiencies that he has. There's some defensive holes that he possesses, but that makes for a fun fighter. He gives and he takes, and I'm looking forward to him sort of climbing up the 160-pound rankings and seeing what he can do. The other fights, the opening part of the broadcast, the bantamweight contest, not a lot of surprises there. Leo Santa Cruz is a kid that I'm really familiar with. I think I said it last time I was interviewed by you. I told you that somebody that I'd literally seen grow up in the gyms out here in Southern California.
Right.
And bantamweights usually make for good fights. This kid makes for good fights. And you put him in there with fellow young bantamweight up-and-comer, and with his style, you have a recipe for a war. And I'm looking forward to him fighting somebody who's young and in his prime the way he is now for his first or second IBF bantamweight title defense. And I'm looking forward to a long reign from Leo Santa Cruz, but also an entertaining reign. And the other two fights on the card, the main event between Tarver and Coyote, disappointing. And I could have totally done without the Austin Trout, Delvin Rodriguez WBA junior middleweight title bout. That was rather monotonous.
Well, and that brings me to my question about Austin Trout. The Canelo Alvarez sweepstakes are, I guess, hot and heavy, so to speak. Did Austin Trout do enough to put his name in that hat for September 15th?
His name is in the hat. You know why? Because he has a title, and people say these titles are worthless, but they are worth something if you are a fighter who isn't super exciting, somebody who the networks haven't been interested in. They do give you some bargaining power, some leverage as far as getting access to significant fights, and just being recognized. I mean, if Austin Trout did not have that WBA title, I think he would still be an unknown fighter, as he has been for many years. I mean, for me personally, I knew Austin Trout more from his sparring sessions with Antonio Margarito and Sergio Martinez than any fight that I had ever seen on TV. So he has the title. He is undefeated. There's a bit of a storyline there with that WBA title that he holds. He won it from Saul Alvarez's older brother, Rigoberto. So there's a little bit of the revenge of the brother storyline. And I tell you what, Bob, it doesn't hurt that Trout is managed or advised, if you will, by Al Heyman, which is probably the reason why he found his way onto this card and onto the Showtime broadcast. So, he's a bona fide junior middleweight contender. I mean, Delvin Rodriguez is a real guy. He's a veteran, and he did the right things to basically shut down Delvin Rodriguez. Didn't make for an entertaining fight. In terms of entertainment value, I don't think he has earned that shot at Alvarez, because Alvarez is going to be headlining a pay-per-view card on September 15. And when you talk about a pay-per-view headliner, you hope that it's going to be entertaining. You hope it's going to be exciting. But I will say this: Trout is a worthy opponent for Alvarez in the respect that he's a bona fide contender, and he's difficult. He could probably, on a good night, beat Alvarez. So, in that regard, he is worthy. And Richard Schaefer said after the fight card during the post-fight press conference that Trout's name is among a small group of potential candidates to challenge Canelo.
We'll get to this week's pay-per-view in just a minute, but before we hit on that September 15th pay-per-view, I got to be honest with you. I'm not holding out high hopes for a great main event, but what I am holding out hopes for, what Golden Boy has done before, is put a solid card on 1 through 4.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you look at their stable. It's the biggest stable in boxing belongs to either Top Rank or Golden Boy. I can't do a head count right now.
Right.
But I'm thinking Golden Boy has at least 60 fighters on contract. At least 60. Maybe they have upwards of 70, 75. So they have a lot of talent, and they have a lot of talent that's world class and that's ready to be fighting in high profile 10 and 12 round contests. So they have the ability.
Winky, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Even if it's their own fighters, even if they're not working with another promoter, they have enough fighters in various marquee divisions where they can stack an undercard. So I'm hoping if Alvarez, especially if Alvarez winds up fighting Austin Trout, they're going to need to have at least 1 or 2 guaranteed barn burners on that pay-per-view undercard.
I think they did a pay-per-view. It may have been a year or two ago now, to where Michael Katsidis was on there. The late Edwin Valero was the headliner, and it was, I think, a lightweight.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the better pay-per-views I'd seen.
And the amazing thing about that card was, and I remember it because I actually did the broadcast.
That's why I liked it so much.
Hopkins. Oh, there. Thank you very much. And Bernard Hopkins. That was an interesting broadcast boost for that one. But that card kind of fell apart, but it still wound up being good. You had Edwin Valero in the main event, and he was fighting a guy who was like riding Antonio Pitalua, who was riding like a 14-bout KO streak.
Right.
And a puncher. He was fighting a fellow puncher, and it was supposed to be. I think it was supposed to be Jorge Barrios against Famoso Hernandez, and Joel Casamayor against Katsidis. But Casamayor fell out with an injury.
Thank God.
And Barrios had visa problems or whatever. So they brought in replacements. They brought in Rolando Reyes to fight. Katsidis fight, that stayed the same. It was Katsidis against Jesus Chavez.
Right.
Local. The fight took place in Austin, Texas. But Julio Diaz was supposed to fight Casamayor. Casamayor fell out, and they put in Rolando Reyes, who actually upset Julio Diaz on fight night. And then they got Vicente Escobedo to step in and face Famoso Hernandez. And that was a really good 10-rounder where Carlos just gave it his all, but he got dropped twice by Escobedo, and Escobedo won that fight. But, yeah, a good card. And, of course, Valero took out Pitalua in 2 expensive rounds in the main event. But yeah, I gave Golden Boy credit just for attempting to stack mean? Where there wasn't a star on that card. But I think what the Golden Boy's trying to do is, even when there is a star, and I don't know if you can call Saul Alvarez a star. He is in Mexico. I think they're working on making him a star here in the United States. He definitely sells tickets. But even with somebody who's at least a star in one part of the world, I think they're still going to try to stack that undercard, and they have to. I mean, they have guys under contract who are begging them for high profile fights, and there's only so many dates that they can secure on Showtime and on HBO. So there's guys like Paulie Malignaggi who just won a welterweight title, who's saying, "Hey, man, I want to fight on U.S. television. Right. Please put me in there with somebody that HBO or Showtime will be interested in." And they have to appease guys like this, and they've got so many other just contenders, that are itching for that exposure. So I think they will be able to put together a pretty decent card in September.
Winky Wright and Shane Mosley both retire this week, based on what we saw out of Antonio Tarver. Or really, maybe not even based on what we saw, but based on what is there left to do. Should Tarver do the same?
Tarver, I think, he still talks about fighting at heavyweight. I think this fight let him know that, he looked a little paunchy and ponderous at 200 pounds. I don't think he's going to carry 200-plus pounds effectively and be able to do anything against, certainly not against the Klitschko. I don't care how old the Klitschkos are themselves. They're natural heavyweights, and they're athletic, and they're smart. I think he may have lost some bargaining edge when it comes to fighting one of the title holders overseas, but he still has his name, so I'm sure Marco Huck would love to fight him. Same with the Polish guy who's got I believe he has a WBC title.
Right.
And I think Tarver's name will command a decent payday overseas. I don't know if he can win a decision in Germany against Marco Huck or against the Polish dude in Poland, but to me, I think that's what he does next. If he decides to continue his career, I'm kind of hoping that he sees the writing on the wall and hangs him up and focuses on his broadcast career, because I think he's terrific.
Yeah, he's not bad at all. Just to comment on that before we talk about the pay-per-view, I was watching a fight that they re-aired the other night on MSG from Ethics with Felix Sturm and Matthew Macklin, and after watching that, I can say it's hard to get a decision in Germany if you're not German.
Yes, it is. It really is. Huck is an aggressive cruiserweight. A lot of fun. He's there for Tarver to line up and clip, but Tarver's reflexes aren't as fast as they once were. And I was surprised that Coyote seemed to be the quicker of the two. His hands seemed at least as fast as Tarver's, if not faster. And I never thought of Coyote as a quick cruiserweight. Speed was not an attribute that came to mind when I thought about Latif Coyote. Now, one thing, we may not be giving Coyote enough credit. We're just saying, okay, Tarver underperformed or he didn't look that good, but I think some credit has to go to Coyote for boxing a smart fight. He didn't just stand in front of Tarver, which would have been dangerous, or didn't just try to walk him down. He utilized some lateral movement. He was trying to set traps in there. He was doing things to frustrate Tarver. But at the same time, he was active. He was outworking the veteran, which is what a younger fighter should do. So I think, Tarver, I think he showed that he is getting old, that, 43 is pushing it, even for a tremendous boxer of his caliber. And I think Coyote proved that he's a real cruiserweight contender. The Ring magazine rated him 8 or 9 going into this fight, but I still thought of him as a prospect based on what I saw from him last year. But I think with this 12-round performance, and that was his first 12-rounder, I think Coyote showed a lot. I think he showed that he's a bona fide lower top 10 level cruiserweight contender.
Televised undercard on Saturday features Guillermo Rigondeaux against Tion Kennedy, Mike Jones and Randall Bailey, and Jorge Arce against Jesus Ruas. Any of that get your blood boiling?
I have some interest in the welterweight title bout. The IBF, the vacant IBF title is on the line for Jones and Randall. And Randall's he's up there in age, but he hasn't appeared to be a faded fighter yet. He's got some craft. He's got a good jab. He was a power puncher at junior welterweight. I'm not sure how powerful he is at 147 pounds, but I'm looking at this fight to sort of be the crowning moment for Mike Jones, who's been around a long time. He was a prospect for many years, kind of under the radar, just fought in Philadelphia, wasn't fighting on television a lot. And he's recently emerged as a contender over the past 2 years. And I'm ready for him to grab a title and, maybe to make for some good fights against fellow welterweight contenders or fellow welterweight title holders. I like the guy. He looks the part. He's a big, physical, imposing Philadelphia-style boxer, which means he's got some craft, he's got some technique, but he fights with a lot of heart. I want to see him. I want to see him on some HBO, Showtime co-features or main events against fellow young, hungry welterweights, because the division could be very hot if the right fighters are matched together. And I think Jones can be a player, and just more importantly, just make for really good fights, and excite an old boxing town. Philadelphia's got a lot of boxing fans, but they haven't, apart from Bernard Hopkins, who's had 1 foot out the door for a number of years. Philadelphia hasn't had a lot to cheer about. So I'd like to see a young standout with a bright future coming out of Philadelphia, which is not to say Philadelphia doesn't have worthy fighters or good fighters. Eddie Chambers fights out of Philadelphia, even though he's from Pittsburgh, and Tayon Kennedy, who's fighting Guillermo Rigondeaux, is also from Philadelphia. But I think if a Philadelphia fighter is going to win this Saturday, it's going to be Mike Jones. I don't see Tayon Kennedy getting it done against Rigondeaux. He's a good, solid technician. He fights with a lot of heart, like a true Philadelphia warrior, but I think that aggressive nature is going to play right into the hands of Rigondeaux.
How much of a chance do you give Bradley over Pacquiao?
Give him a chance. People are pontificating and theorizing that Manny Pacquiao is slowing down, that he just doesn't have interest in boxing anymore, that, just the wear and tear of a long career and more than 50 pro bouts is catching up with him. And if that is true, Timothy Bradley is the right guy to expose that. If Manny Pacquiao doesn't have the same zest for boxing, if he's not training as hard as he used to train, if he's just distracted by past, marital woes or, his newfound faith, if he's not 100% focused on winning this fight on Saturday, Timothy Bradley is going to make him pay for that.
Who's the last guy you gave the best shot against Pacquiao?
I guess you probably have to go back to Miguel Cotto.
Okay.
November of 2009, and I still pick Pacquiao in that fight, and I'm picking Pacquiao in this fight. I thought I figured Pacquiao would be too much for Cotto, despite Cotto's power and his overall technique. And I think Timothy Bradley has some attributes that are going to trouble Pacquiao, especially this version, this 33-year-old version of Pacquiao. I think Bradley's speed and his overall athleticism and his quirky style, he's kind of in and out, but he's still putting pressure on a guy. That's going to bother Pacquiao. The counter right hand is going to be a key weapon for Bradley. The body attack that Bradley has, that people don't talk about a lot, that could be a key weapon. But at the same time, I think Bradley's aggressive nature and the fact that he's a young fighter with so much desire, so much tenacity, I think that can play against him. I think Bradley can make Pacquiao look really bad in the early going, but then he can make him look really, really good. Because when he gets clipped, I think his nature is to get up and to scrap. He's not going to do what Cotto did when Cotto got hurt early in his fight with Pacquiao, or what Shane Mosley did after he got dropped early in his fight with Pacquiao, which is try to run out the clock,
right?
Backpedal and hope that he sees an opening where he can catch Pacquiao coming in. I think Bradley will get up when he's hurt, and I've seen this before, especially in the one fight where he got dropped really hard early, the Kendall Hall fight. He gets up, and his nature, his instinct is to swarm the other guy. And he gets a little wild when he does it. He He comes in with his head, like people say, and that chin is not always tucked, and his punches are not always straight. Sometimes they're kind of wild and winging and looping, and I think that can be a disaster against a sharp, fast, powerful puncher like Manny Pacquiao. So I'm liking Pacquiao by, I think at some point in the fight, like mid-round, he clips Timmy, and Timmy's conditioning and his determination, and just the ferocity of his retaliation attack. I think it keeps him in the fight for a couple rounds, but I think that Pacquiao eventually catches him again and closes the show. So I'm predicting Pacquiao by a late stoppage.
Two final questions.
It'll be a competitive fight.
Yeah, I think it'll be much more competitive than what the average person might think. Two final questions. If Bradley were to win, in your opinion, what becomes the must-see fight for, or the biggest fight in terms of boxing that maybe even could get the general public to wake up a little bit?
You're saying if Pacquiao wins?
If Bradley wins. Because if Pacquiao wins, I think it's still Pacquiao-Mayweather.
Right. If Bradley pulls the upset, contractually, he has to fight Pacquiao again if Pacquiao wants that fight. And, personally, I don't think it matters what Pacquiao wants. I think Bob Arum is running the show. So if Aaron says, yes, you're going to fight him in a rematch in November, I think Pacquiao obeys, whether he wants to or not. That's the fight that we're going to get, regardless of what's out there for Bradley at welterweight. And I think for Bradley, that's the best fight, outside of a showdown with Mayweather. I mean, I think people would be interested in seeing Bradley versus Mayweather, whether or not that could get done with Bradley being a top-ranked fighter and Mayweather being represented by Golden Boy Promotions. That would remain to be seen, but I think the media and hardcore fans would certainly clamor for Bradley to face Mayweather. You have two undefeated American fighters. One of them is getting a little bit long in the tooth. One of them, especially if he beats Pacquiao on Saturday, has proved that he is coming to his own, not just as a champion, but as an elite fighter. And thanks to 24/7 and all of the promotional backing and hype of this first fight with Pacquiao, Bradley's known a little more to the general public than he was, in previous years. So I think that's the fight everyone's going to clamor for. I don't know if that would happen. I say if Bradley upsets Pacquiao, which is in the realm of possibility, the fight we're going to get is a rematch for Pacquiao in November. And if the fight is good, I don't mind seeing that. If it's a firefight, I don't mind seeing that at all. And if Bradley dominates Pacquiao, or if it's a completely ugly fight,
right,
and Bradley wins an unpopular decision, or a decision that people don't care about. If they say, okay, yeah, you shut him down, you won, but it was dreadfully boring. A rematch with Pacquiao is not something anyone's going to be clamoring for. But this being boxing, we would probably get it anyways.
Final thing, Doug, as always, appreciate your time. As I peruse Twitter today, I see reports and rumors that Antonio Margarito is hanging it up. If that is the case, how good is that for Antonio Margarito?
It's good because I think that has been in bad shape, ever since the Pacquiao fight. When was that? That was November of 2010?
Right.
Yeah, I believe it was. It was November of 2010. And it didn't do Margarito any good to fight Miguel Cotto. The sparring that he did in preparation for the Cotto fight, and then the damage that I took during the Cotto fight, it's no good for him. And I know Margarito. The first Margarito fight that I covered was in 1996, and Margarito was maybe 19 or 20 years old at the time. One thing I know about him is that he saves his money. He doesn't live extravagantly. And he made a lot of money with the Pacquiao fight and with the Miguel Cotto fight. And I know that he's invested his money well. He hasn't wasted it. He's put money aside. He's invested in certain businesses in Tijuana and in Southern California. So he's comfortable. He's not like living large. He's not like Mayweather or anything like that.
Well, who is besides you?
For his lifestyle, yeah. I mean, Floyd Mayweather will go through $50 million quicker than Antonio Margarito will go through $500,000.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and he's made a couple million. I mean, it's kind of bizarre and perverse and ironic, but the hand wrap scandal, which forever tarnished his legacy. When people talk about Margarito, that's going to be the first thing that comes up is that he had his license revoked by the California State Athletic Commission for attempting to load his gloves prior to the Shane Mosley fight, which he lost. It was terrible for his reputation. No one's going to talk about him being a 3-time welterweight title holder, or being willing to face all of the top welterweight contenders of the past decade. They're going to talk about that scandal, that controversy. But on the flip side, that controversy succeeded in doing something that Arum could never do with Margarito, and that's make him a viable pay-per-view B-side, because he was vilified so much by the boxing media and even the general sports press that he became a villain.
Right.
And they were able to sell that, and he actually became a solid pay-per-view opponent, pay-per-view B-side for the A-sides like Manny Pacquiao and Miguel Cotto. And people bought, particularly the Pacquiao fight, people bought that. More than 1 million people bought that, and he actually got a piece of that action. And so he did very well. He financially speaking, that controversy from that shameful incident, or what almost became a shameful incident, it helped him out financially. So I know he's doing well financially speaking, because I'm fairly close to his co-managers. So if he's calling if he's really hanging it up, and you never know with fighters, I think it's good. He's doing it at the right time to where he doesn't sustain any more damage to that eye. And let's face it, even if his eye wasn't damaged, he had a grueling 16, 17-year boxing career. This guy was not a defensive genius. He took a lot of punches, a lot of punishment, not just in the fights themselves, but in training. For him to continue on, he was risking permanent damage. So it's good that he's calling it quits now, if that is indeed true.
And I think it was in that face-off that they did with Kellerman before the Cotto fight, where he said he was willing to die in the ring, and I believe him.
Yeah, he is. A lot of guys say that and they don't really mean it.
Right.
And Margarito's one of those guys, because in the Pacquiao fight was the proof, because that fight should have been stopped. I mean, somebody should have stopped it. It wasn't stopped. I mean, really after the 8th round, that was hard to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
It looked like he had been attacked by a gang of guys with baseball bats, and they definitely got the better of him. That was pretty nasty. But there was nothing really special about Margarito, except for that, his ability to absorb punishment, but beyond that, his willingness to absorb punishment. And when that's your best attribute, it's not good to have a really, really long career.
Absolutely. Well, Doug, as always, we appreciate the time. We'll talk soon to review and preview more in the wonderful world of boxing.
Anytime, Bob.